Carolina's in your class. Can you wake him up for me?
Ethan, you're up.
Ethan fell asleep just like that?
No,
Mr. Andrews, remember that on report card? Shut that door. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. On behalf of the School Board of Directors, Mr. Pinnabone, Frank, Board President, Mr. Fainall couldn't be here today, Mr. Vandenberg couldn't be here today. Vice President Ms. Billy Weiss is here, Ms. Price couldn't be here, Mr. Obie couldn't be here, Ms. Hess couldn't be here, Mr. George Tando is here, and Mr. Dominic Buscemi couldn't be here. We also have our design team, Mr. Josh Bryce, and Arif Fazil from Dewey Engineering. Arif is passing things out. Josh is in the back getting ready to present. We also have Mr. Galliato of Alloy 5 Architects, who did all the architecture. Randy's behind right there, hiding. We're going to pass it over at this time to our solicitor, John Freund, to explain what this meeting is, which is an Act 34 hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Pinnabone. This meeting, hearing, I should say, public hearing is required under the School Code, Section 701.1. And I'll read just 2 or 3 sentences that will explain exactly what this is about from Section 701. In the event that a new school building or a substantial addition to an existing building is to be constructed or leased, the school board shall, by a majority vote of all of its members, authorize a maximum project cost and a maximum building construction cost to be financed by the district or amortized by lease rentals to be paid by the district. Building construction costs shall consist of the cost of all building construction, including the general construction costs, plumbing, engineering, heating, electrical, ventilation, structural costs, equipment, fixtures, and architectural engineering fees related thereto, but not including costs for site acquisition and development, upgrading, and engineering fees relating thereto. In all cases, a public hearing shall be held not later than 30 days before the school district submits the initial building construction and cost estimates to the Department of Education for approval. Notice of the hearing shall be given not later than 20 days before the date of the scheduled hearing. I can certify, Mr. Pinnabone, that first, the required board resolution was adopted July 25, 2017, that the notice of public hearing was duly advertised on August 9th, 2017, that the description of the project has been made available as required by the Act, and therefore certify to the board and for the record that all the prerequisite conditions for this hearing have been fulfilled.
Thank you, Mr. Freund. So the purpose of this meeting is for the public, which aren't many, but to hear about the projects of Palmer Elementary School, which we will do first, and then Cheston Elementary School. Cheston, pardon me. Cheston first, and then Palmer Elementary School. Cheston first, then Palmer, and we're going to hear about it, and then we'll take any type of comment from the audience. After the presentation, questions and statements will be taken. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes for comment. At this time, we're going to pass it to Mr. John Reinhardt for some project history and need for project alternative and considerations.
Thank you, Mr. President, and welcome everyone to our hearing this evening. Looking at both our plans for Cheston and Palmer School, there are some aspects of the program and the needs of both buildings that are very similar. And I want to first draw everyone's attention back to the change in laws in educating children, which it goes back to the 70s. where we faced a tremendously positive change in trying to educate all children in the neighborhood school. I say it's tremendously positive because that's where our kids belong, in their neighborhood schools, all of our kids. But the challenge to do that was especially and has been especially difficult for buildings that were designed during an era when all children were not necessarily accommodated in our neighborhood schools. And both Cheston and Palmer elementary schools fit that description. With Palmer being a building that was built in the Eisenhower administration or the late Truman administration, late years of Truman administration, Palmer remains an extremely important location for lots of students from that attendance area, but it does not have, along with Cheston, they do not have the ADA requirements that enable us to fully include all children in our attendance. Cheston was built a bit later, I believe in the 1960s, but again before changes in the laws affected public education in the U.S. So what you have at Cheston essentially is a building that reflects an era when most kids were welcome to the neighborhood, with some not. If you take a look at Cheston and its location, you'll find that since its opening, some of aspects of its physical plant and the plans for Cheston never really came to fruition. For example, the main door, the front door of the school, has never been used as the front door of the school. And the side door has become the front door of the school and was always the front door as far as I can remember. Now that doesn't necessarily play into one's desire to want to walk in the building, but it certainly challenged us when it came to trying to make sure that that building was as safe and secure as possible. Cheston was a challenge in and of itself because of its layout and its use of a non-main entrance or a side entrance as the main door. That's just one piece of information that we looked at and gathered when we looked at Cheston School. We really have an opportunity to bring all of our facilities up to what we would consider to be a level of appropriateness. We found that when we looked at the building, in Cheston in particular, that the cost of the upgrades and so forth was such that it was almost foolish for us not to consider the whole idea of building a new building on the adjacent property. I think that we also have to take into consideration, as the board did, the desires and the needs of the community. Our expectations of public schools have changed dramatically over the last 30 years. People want their children to go to a school that's air conditioned. People believe that that's the appropriate environment for their children to learn in an air-conditioned and well-heated building. Cheston and Palmer both are two of those buildings that do not have what we consider to be solid, working, environmental facilities in those schools, and that made us all take a long, hard look at what it would mean for us to be able to upgrade those buildings to provide students with those kinds of circumstances with the air conditioning and the heating. In addition to that, we have to take a look at the science behind building products and the use of building products and the fact that many of the products we used years ago are now considered not products to use in the construction of buildings. And of course, I'm mainly speaking of asbestos. We need to make sure that our schools remain as healthy environments for our children. So when you capture all of those things, as this board did maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, there was no question that we have a challenging set of circumstances before us. Needless to say, ADA requirements are going to cause us to invest a great deal of resources into those buildings to have them become accessible to all students and to all community members. Needless to say, the removal of building materials that are now considered to be inappropriate is going to cost something else, another hunk of resources. And now you take a look at what modern schools offer students in the way of technology, and you have another pressure that's on this community. I spent this afternoon, part of the time this afternoon, observing what our projectors at Pax Nosa are going to bring to the classrooms in that school. And I left there totally convinced every classroom in this district has to have that capability. It is revolutionary. It is a game changer for teachers to be able to use that kind of technology for kids in their classrooms. And it would be inherently unfair and inequitable for us to offer that to some and not offer it to others. All of these together cause us to really take time to sit back and assess where we're going. The hardest thing for us, I think, as a group, is to be able to predict what schools will feel like and look like and what they're going to offer kids 5 and 10 years into the future. That's a real challenge. Because if what I saw today for teachers to use on a daily basis for their lessons, what I saw today is any clue to what lies and looms ahead, schools in the future are going to be tremendously rewarding places for everyone. Not just children, but for parents and for the neighborhoods in which they are located. So we're looking, and we have looked at all of these areas. I think people have heard us talk about the community school concept. That's an extremely important part of what we see at Cheston. We want that building to offer as much as possible to the taxpayers who are going to invest in it. And in order to offer as much as possible to the taxpayers who invested in it, we have to design a place where the gym, the cafeteria, the library, and perhaps the medical rooms are open to others after school hours and on weekends. You can't do that very easily now at the existing building. So we looked at Cheston especially with this community school in mind. We applied the same concept to Palmer. And you'll see in the design of the Palmer School that we've also attempted to cluster community facilities, or facilities that would be desired by people in the community groups. We've clustered them in an area of the building with accessibility and ease in keeping the places secure. So that was another realm of pressure put on us in terms of trying to design projects that are going to meet the needs of our communities in the future. It's not easy looking at these schools and predicting. There's a certain amount of assumptions that you have to make. you have to make the assumption that 10 years from now, we're going to have communities who are going to want to use these facilities that they paid for, and perhaps more so than they have in the past. We got to make the assumption that with the technology that is changing and becoming, making information so readily available to everyone, that 5 or 10 years from now, our students have to leave our schools equipped with far more options for accessing that information. And I guess we have to assess what responsibilities we have as the people who now look at these buildings. What responsibilities do we have to set this off in the right course? That is essentially the main areas of information and concerns we looked at. We've had long conversations about all of this. We understand the costs, but I think what you'll see tonight is that ultimately building new facilities at Palmer and Cheston both will ultimately be the wisest way of maintaining community resources in our school district here. And that is really as much a responsibility for this board as anything else, to make sure that the facilities that they own and that they oversee don't deteriorate to a point where they can't be utilized to the best of our ability. And in both Cheston and Palmer, we're concerned about that.
Thank you, Mr. Reinhardt.
Yep.
At this time, we'll go to project options considered. Josh from Dewey Engineering, followed by the architect.
Thank you, Mr. Pinbone. And I'm not going to recap completely what Mr. Reinhardt had just outlined in a very comprehensive manner, so thank you very much for that. Needless to say, as you can hear from the superintendent's comments, it was an extensive and well thought out process to arrive at the conclusion of building a new Cheston Elementary School. Obviously, starting at the first option, or the least comprehensive, would be to simply repair what is there. I think everybody, after hearing the comments, would agree that it does not completely address the community school philosophy, nor would it address the overall sort of holistic needs of Cheston. Very limited in scope and very systematic in repairs. The next option obviously would be a renovation, a more complete sort of interior renovation. Again, what that excludes are any exterior improvements that would assist the community in using the spaces within the building. It would also limit the district in their educational plan. In other words, limit the amount of sections per grade level, the spaces within the building that are available. So it would certainly be a hindrance from the educational development of that building. After those options were considered at length and were discussed, ultimately the new construction option was considered, again, taking into account the layout of the building, the safety aspect, the efficiency of how the building operates, all those items in consideration of spatial limitations, and also the cost impacts that as we look at attacking those first two options and really without addressing the overall needs, those costs would basically approach a new facility anyway. So ultimately, the board, in consultation with everybody and with the design professionals, decided that the new construction option was the best choice for the district. So with that, I will pass it on to Randy Galliato from Alloy 5 Architects. He will go through some of the plans from a site and building perspective.
Thank you, Josh. Give you some of the building parameters quickly before we dive into the plans. The project is a new All new construction, 95,000 square foot, 3-story building for grades K-5. The existing Cheston School will be demolished following occupancy of the new facility. The building is designed to meet the educational program established by the district. The gym, cafeteria, and library are also intended for community use, and we'll show you that in the floor plans. And obviously, the energy efficient systems are going to be incorporated as far as high efficiency chillers, boilers, and LED lighting with occupancy sensors. I'll start with the site plan. This site really lends itself very well to building a new building while the existing building is still occupied and in use. This shaded area here represents the new building footprint. This would be Lincoln Street, Cole Street, and Reynolds, with Frank over here to the right. So this white area here is the existing footprint. It will be converted to athletic fields once the new building is constructed. This gave us an opportunity to really improve and enhance the circulation around the site. If you've been there in the morning or in the afternoon, you'll know that buses and the parent traffic is very congested. So we planned this enhancement on Cole Street, which is a loop drive, which will serve double purpose. One, during those times of drop off and pickup, parents will be able to loop in off of the public street and drop off and pick up, and then peel out. And then when school is not in operation, it could be used as overflow parking as well. Reynolds Street, that loop will be used for buses. So you can see there's a whole city block separating the parent drop-off from the bus drop-off, which is really going to improve site circulation and make it a safer site. And if you also have ever been there during ingress and egress, you will know that there are many families standing out front or out back waiting to pick up their children. So it lended itself very well to providing a pedestrian walk down the center of the site, extending Milton Street through. So Milton Street will be extended through for pedestrians only and emergency vehicles when needed, and the parents can queue up out front and wait for their children. So there's one secure access point to enter the building. That's the main entrance, which will happen off of this new pedestrian walk. Parents will queue up outside. The yellow represents new sidewalk and curbing. I'll go through the floor plans, but to give you an idea, this big chunk in the front represents the gymnasium and the cafeteria and the library, which will all be opened up to the community. And we'll be able to securely lock down this area here in the evening. This will be the classroom wing, which is stacked symmetrically 3 stories. So allows us to open up majority of the school for community use. Next slide. So this is the lower level. One unique aspect of this site is it allowed us to put the main level or the main functional spaces of the building on the mid-level of the building. So along Lincoln Street there will be a 3-story classroom wing, but that second level of the classroom wing will expand into the major functions of the building. So when you're inside the building, in those spaces, you're only 1 floor away from the next level. This lower level will be kindergarten and 1st grade, with the egress stair for emergency use. Next slide. This is the main level. This is the meat of the building. This area here represents that pedestrian walk. You can see the parent drop-off to the right and the bus drop-off to the left. You'll enter the building into one secure entrance, so no more use of multiple entrances to allow kids in and out. You'll walk into a secure vestibule where you will be buzzed into the office, and then where you will then be buzzed into the rest of the facility. To the right is the gymnasium. To the left is the cafeteria. This small teal box here is the administration area. You will then walk down through a main connector, which will connect you to the art and music rooms and the library. So right at this point here, there will be a security gate, and you can think of more than half of this main level of the building will be open to the public for public use after school hours. There will be a separate entrance off of Pole Street when needed, and we're allowing the music classroom to do double duty here. So it will serve as a music classroom and also open up to the stage, so the stage can be used during school hours or for performances at night. Second and third grade will be housed here on that second floor of the classroom wing, but the main level of the building. Next slide. And then the fourth and the fifth grade will be on the upper level of that wing. So you can see this school is extremely efficient. It's stacked efficiently. It makes sense. It's easy to travel through, and every space is the same. So every kid is getting the same amount of wall space in this classroom, chalkboards, technology, etc. That concludes the overview of the building.
Yeah, Mr. Galliano.
Okay, so just to touch on some other kind of general points to make about this project, we are currently in the land development phase with the City of Easton, getting any local agency approvals that are required, whether it's the city or the county or the state level. Again, the building will focus on the district's educational plan. That's really the big driving force for the space layout within the building. Energy efficiency is going to be a major factor with the design of this building. In this location especially, construction logistics and phasing will be critical for everyone to establish a detailed phasing plan so that we make sure that both the new construction area and the existing building are properly separated and that the site remains very orderly and environmentally friendly. The overall time frame for the project, we are looking to be bid in the bid phase in March of 2018 with a construction start time frame of June 2018. Looking at a 2-year construction time frame. And again, once the new building is completed, occupants will then begin functioning in that new building, and demolition of the existing building and the site work associated with that side of the site are looking to be complete in the fall of 2020. Thanks. I won't go into detail. These are PlanCon documents that do need to be submitted along with the Act 34 information. It's basically a very detailed breakdown of total project costs on these pages. What we can do is skip ahead to what is adopted, thank you very much, what is adopted ultimately by the board. Going through those very detailed cost estimates, we spit out 2 important numbers that everyone needs to be aware of. First is the maximum building construction cost, which Mr. Freund had also mentioned earlier, which is $24,535,000, with a maximum project cost of $32,171,000. We are very cost conscious throughout the entire process from design through construction. We do anticipate some alternate bids that may be developed in order to best identify some value engineering or value-driven alternates. May include roof types, architectural finishes, mechanical and electrical manufacturers, or kind of system types. So just some examples of items that may be developed, again, to keep our costs in line with where they need to be. Okay. And in speaking of costs, Mr. Ken Phillips is here with us tonight, and I will turn it over to him for the financial impact analysis.
And just for the record, Mr. Phillips is our bond counsel for the district. He's been with us for many years. And Financial advisor.
Thank you, Mr. Finbone, and George and Josh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. One of the requirements, before we get to some of the questions maybe from the public, the last part of the presentation is normally the cost estimates based on the numbers that George and Josh just reviewed with you. And the state requires that the district take a look at all the potential different costs, and they take also the various different options, how they could finance some debt. Those options pretty much are broken down into cash, i.e. do you have cash to pay for the project? Very, very seldom does someone have this amount of money to pay for a project. Smaller projects, potentially yes. And then you can see general obligation debt, which is based on the full faith, credit, and taxing power of the district, going through a local authority, which is predominantly done way back in the 50s and 60s for the State Public School Building Authority. So, in accordance with state regulations, we take a look at all those analysis. In this particular case, the general obligation issue of about $32 million needed for this project is the least costly. I want to take a look at the footnotes a second, because these numbers on this page, for those who would look at the really small print that Josh just went through in terms of the client bond, this 32 million number encompasses costs on pages DO2 and then DO3. And then we use financing cost estimates for authorities and so on. The other thing is that the state anticipates, well, if the state has money in your budget, they can also reimburse you for a project. All the existing indebtedness of the district, and I've had the pleasure to be here for 20-some years, has reimbursement associated with it. The state has moratoriums based on PlanCom projects now. Potentially, there could be some money coming back to the district, and your architects and your engineers are going through that process. If that would happen, the estimate's about 5 cents on the dollar, okay, for this particular piece of financing, and then potentially more when we start talking about Palmer as well. For the next slide, would be great. For tonight's illustration, though, we assume that we're using a 0% reimbursement. So everything you see tonight is pretty much 100% cost, and that's how the district is budgeting based on that. The anticipated millage impact is seen on this page, and then we're going to probably look at it on another page in maybe clearer fashion. But the state requires that you try to ascertain what's the best way to issue the debt. And you can see some numbers here that if we took a look at the debt and did it on a level basis, meaning sort of like your home mortgage, maybe equal annual payments of principal and interest, and more principal in the latter end, more interest up front, and so on, you'd be about that number, 3.6 million, which equates to about 2.29 mils. But in this particular case, the district, and we'll take a look at the illustration, is going to issue the debt in a wraparound fashion, meaning they're going to take all their existing debt, which is fairly short, and they're going to encompass the Cheston project and the Palmer project and future other projects in a sort of a wraparound where we defer some of that principal, because as the old debt goes away, we're going to use those dollars to help make payment for the new debt. 75% of every issue done in Pennsylvania is done this way. It's basically making use of existing indebtedness as it goes away, and then placing new debt on top of it. So the 2.29 requirement, if we were level debt, goes to about 0.96 mils. Okay? There's also, this is the direct cost portion of the conversation, meaning bricks and mortar, financing debt. There's also an indirect cost down at footnote 4, which results in sometimes it results in, do we need more personnel? Do we have insurances that are going to cost more? In this particular case, the anticipation is $0 for that, because the staff's going to stay on staff. We're going to have new energy systems, which could be a savings. Okay, so the indirect costs are anticipated to be 0 for this particular project. Next slide. So now we talk about more small print. Okay, but what this illustrates, and I know it's very hard to read, but I'm going to try to help you out here, is that this slide reflects about $79 million worth of project work. And what the state requires, this project's going to be about 32. But the state says when you have public hearings like this, you can't just show this project in a vacuum. You have to take a look at, we're going to talk about Palmer here in about 10, 15, 20 minutes. So you have to show the other things that the district is considering as well. So we're about to settle on a $9.5 million financing, which is the seed money to get started on not only these two projects, Palmer Cheston that we're talking about, but also some other things that the district is getting done. And then we have two $35 million projected issues to be completed, one in 18 and one in 19. You heard Josh just go through the bid process in spring of next year with completion in summer of 2020. So it's anticipated that we're going to need the money for Cheston and the money for Palmer over the next several years. So I made reference to this wraparound situation, wraparound debt. The very first column represents this existing district net debt service. 12.2 million goes out to about 12.5 or so, 12.6. But it comes due in 2028. Okay? So there's really no magic, comparing it to a home mortgage, there's no magic to having a 20-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage or a 30-year mortgage. Okay, the first mortgage I ever had was 30 years because that's sort of what people did back then, back in the 70s. But now we sort of structure the debt in conjunction with the existing indebtedness of the district. So you see interest payments pretty much up here and then the large principal payments down here where your debt goes away. But it's a very efficient way of funding projects, especially under Act 1. Act 1 limits the district and how much money they can raise for debt. Okay, it also limits how much money they can raise for general operational purposes. So this green column represents the anticipated, and I'm going to read those numbers to you because they're pretty small. Looking at financing needs of $79 million. Okay, and let's just look at those, regardless if it's for Cheston or Palmer or whatever. The district has put in place about 0.59 mils, and then 0.38, then 0.37, then another 0.37, and 0.37. So their debt goes from 12.2 to roughly 15.6. It's about $3.5 million to fund $79 million. Okay, not to get caught up on particular projects, but in terms of just looking at dollars. So the way that districts now need to do it because of Act 1 is to phase these mills in over a period of time, encompass that in their budgets. All right. The numbers we use here, we use the anticipated value of mill 1.6 million. We don't inflate that. Another conservative approach. We also, it's very hard to see, but in the bottom we have interest rate contingencies built in there. We can't predict rates. Okay, no one can. But we have about 0.75%, probably a little higher right now, of a contingency built in there because we don't know where the rates are going to be come 2018 or come 2019 when we have the anticipation of the projects. Next slide. That's it. Okay. So with that, Mr. Pinabone, I will turn it over to you for questions for the financing team.
Thank you, Mr. So at this time, I'm just going to ask, is there any board members, not many of us, would you like to make a comment quickly before we go into public? No? We're going to ask everybody to please limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. When you step to the podium, please sign in, state your name and address. And anyone from the public who would like to be heard on Cheston Elementary School. No sign-in sheet there?
No, just state your name.
Or you can just state it, we got it on the record here.
My name is Lance Wheeler. I'm the president of the Eastern Branch of the NAACP.
Say again?
NAACP. I guess I'm here. I thought the meeting was the school board meeting, but in turn, I know Cheston's being built, and that's a great thing. Like Mr. Reinhardt explained the differences of Palmer and Cheston. I'm here tonight, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but we would like, as the public, and there's some information out there that I've been gathering, to see if we could rename Cheston Elementary School. And here's why I say that. We have two historians that were educators in our school district that came from Southside, Mr. Jones and Mr. Houston. So tonight I'm just putting out there to the school board to let you know that as a branch we are getting a petition together to see about renaming Cheston Elementary School. And I know for sure there's schools that have been renamed in the valley, but as Chestnut Elementary has a history, I think with Mr. Jones and Mr. Houston being educators in our school district, I think this would be a good time to rename a school being built on South Side with 2 educators that are still in our school district that are alive, and kids can reflect back to what these guys really are about. So that's something that I would like to bring to the school board. We are starting a petition probably in September. I know it's a 2-year process, but just so the school board knows, and we'll move back again to this regular meeting to announce that we are having a petition signed, and a lot of people are interested in renaming, or seeing that be renamed to Jones Houston Elementary. And that would be the first black school in the Valley. So there's something I think the school district might want to think about being proud of. So that's what I'd like to say.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public who would like to be heard regarding Chester? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to Linda Palmer. Huh?
Probably want to adjourn this.
Oh, you have to adjourn it to go to the next meeting? Yeah. Can I have a motion to, do I have to ask for a motion?
No, just adjourn.
We're just going to adjourn this meeting of Cheston Act 34 at 6:46 p.m. And we are going to,
I was advertised for 7.
we got to wait 15 minutes. We're going to wait 15 minutes till 7 o'clock, as that's when the next meeting was advertised.